we've recently brought naval helicopters, our Sikorsky's. Previously, we were using Super Pumas. You buy a helicopter, that may be the easiest part. You decide what you want to buy. You send our chaps. We send our chaps to San Diego to train. But to integrate what the helicopter does with the frigate takes a few more years. Now, if you multiply that, and if you wanted your SAF to work in concert as one SAF, your sea or land assets, you can imagine how much is multiplied and why it takes a long time to make sure that your SAF can fight as one potent network force. So since 2002, our defense spending has been about 4.5 to 5% of our GDP. We will continue this steady investments across the timeline because it helps us achieve the maximal results, and it's disruption, the least disruptive for both our men and machines. So as I said, we'll continue this prudent approach. We are introducing new platforms. This year this year the Air Force inaugurated its first naval helicopter. It was in January. Recently, for those of you who attended our Terex-equipped motorized infantry battalion, we launched it, established it in May. We've bought also a new, what we call a ground-based air defense system. This is a Spider, SPYDER, ground-based system. It replaces our 30-year-old Rapier air defense system. And in the coming months, the Army will launch the first HIMARS, the high mobility missiles. It's a battery, as well as our national maritime security system will be operationalized. We'll also take delivery of our Heron UAVs. Heron UAVs will replace our Searcher-class UAVs, our unmanned aircraft vehicles, which have been in service since the 1990s. So we are progressively and will continue to have new platforms that are integrated to the larger SAF. Now, procuring equipment, the right type of equipment, training the people. One of our constant challenges is how do you have realistic training? In a place that is 700 square kilometers, how do you train? But you have to train realistically because that's the only way to test and hone SAF's ability. And we accomplish this through large-scale exercises. Battalion, brigade, even divisional level, and as a joint force. And it's only possible outside Singapore, some of this is only possible outside Singapore because of our terrain constraints. So for example, when we bought our new Leopard tanks, we put in our own battlefield management system, what the tank commanders and the tank operators see that can integrate with the rest of the SAF. How do you test that? You can use simulators, but you have to see whether it works in a machine. And we could only do that in Exercise Wallaby in Australia to see whether it could coordinate with other air assets, the Apache helicopters, to have an integrated air-land exercise there. This is what we'll continue to do, large-scale exercises to test and hone the skills of the SAF. I don't want to underplay what I've said about technology and underplay our human asset, because the thinking, well-trained SAF soldier is still our greatest asset. And we'll continue to have to attract and invest in high-caliber servicemen with the right values, capabilities, and that they are ready to confront security challenges. And we have to pay attention because, again, a new generation requires new skills for professional development. And we are tying up with universities, finding courses which are relevant to them professionally, and building very attractive career paths, challenging paths, so that they too are trained. So that will be part and parcel of our professional development, attraction and recruitment schemes. I just want to give you two examples of why we're actually doing very well. I have one example. The first example is 1st W.O. Ng Pui Hung. He's a brigade sergeant major. Now he went for the U.S. Army Sergeant Major course. This was conducted in Texas. He emerged among the top few in his class, received a commendation, a certificate of achievement for his distinguished performance. he was selected to represent the academy in Texas that he was for the 10-mile race. Now, First W Warrant Officer Ng is no stranger to high accomplishments. He recently attended the Navy SEAL course. For those of you who have been following, the Navy SEAL course is a highly rigorous course. They delight in telling you what high percentage fail, not the other way around. And he did very well at that course. Not only passed it, but did very well. The second example is our two military experts. They have ME3 Max Yong and Zhou Yo, who are sent for the Royal Navy Leading Aircraft Controller course, and they've done very well. I'll tell the path to follow up with details, but we have good examples of our servicemen flying our colours high and excelling in international courses. So we are very well benchmarked. I want to talk about my last point in terms of regional security and defense diplomacy. We'll continue to work with like-minded countries to shape architecture, what we call the security architecture here, which protects the interests of all states, big or small. And I would say that in this field, Singapore has an important role to play. Even though we're very small, we've actually punched above our weight. And thankfully, not that we planned for it, but when I took over as defense minister, there were a number of very useful meetings that allowed me to interact with new defense ministers. We reported how I went for the ASEAN 5th Defense Ministers meeting in Jakarta. And they're very useful because I could meet all the ASEAN defense ministers in one fell swoop, have courtesy calls, explain to them. And my main message to them was continuity, that we will continue on the good work that my predecessors have done, that we want to continue what our engagements, and ADMMM plus process. ASEAN Defense Ministers meeting plus our 8 countries that we're having dialogues with, and our expert working groups that is basically a confidence building, real practical exercises and issues that we can deal with to build confidence. We've also recently conducted the Shangri-La Dialogue. It was highly successful from the point of view of us playing a meaningful role in building this kind of security architecture and playing a part in facilitating dialogue. We had 30 ministerial level, in other words, 30 countries majority led by their defense ministers or deputy defense ministers. Now, there is really no good reason why we need to have 30 defense ministers descend on Singapore, if you think about it. And it shows you how we have positioned ourselves to play a meaningful role. And in this security Shangri-La Dialogue, both Secretary Robert Gates and for the first time the Chinese Defense Ministers Liang Guanlian, I understand they had very good bilateral calls, and we had very good bilateral calls with General Liang. And I think that really builds defense relationships. And looking ahead, we'll continue to play an active role in ADMM Plus, and ASEAN. We have other initiatives, CCAT, which is Southeast Asia Cooperation Against Terrorism, our Changi Command and Control Center, saw navies from around the countries, our ASEAN countries, participating. We have an Information Fusion Center. So when we had recent incidents in Somalia, off the coast of Somalia, in the Gulf of Aden, our Information Fusion Center piped information about hijacked ships to their respective countries. They found that very useful. We had the information. We can see what is happening there. We have inputs. These inputs are there, but our Information Fusion Center pieces the information together to give everybody a common picture, and we are the first to know. And it's very, very useful to be a country to be the first to know something that's happening thousands of miles away. Again, there is no good reason why Singapore should be in a position, except for the fact that we've built up the capabilities and we've played a very useful role to bring many countries together to share information. So we'll continue along this. In terms of our overseas deployment, especially in Afghanistan, we'll continue. We'll continue to support the international efforts in our fight against, in other countries, to prevent the export of terrorism. If you remember what happened there, where tapes that were canvassing our installations were found in Kabul. So there's a direct relation to our efforts. So we'll continue to have institutional trainers in Kabul, in Oruzgan, in the Gulf of Aden. We'll continue to deploy them. We've taken command of the CTF, the Command Task Force 151, twice. And our philosophy is that we will continue to play a contributory role and see where we can. I don't want to exaggerate our contributions. We are a small force, but we want to play a meaningful role, and where we can, as part of the global community and the international security efforts, to continue to just play a meaningful role for our own forces. So I've sketched briefly, if I can summarize, that we've come a long way. I've explained to you why we continue to be vulnerable and the new security challenges. I've not talked about minute aspects which your questions can deal with, but I wanted to paint the larger picture, which these forces are very powerful and you can't resist them. You just have to adapt to them. They're not going to change. You can't stop the demography changing, neither can you stop the economic centers changing. You can't stop the fact that Asian countries are modernizing their armed forces. You just have to go with the flow and adapt to them. And I've sketched to you what our own Singapore responds to in terms of our security position, posture, spending, and for our own Singaporeans, what we have to do to make sure that the SAF continues to be able to meet its challenges and for us to be able to build our own defense capabilities.